Tape www.suividecolosénégal.com. À École au Sénégal, c'est facile, tu n'as qu'à te connecter. Tape École au Sénégal, les leçons sont beaucoup plus détaillées.
Now let's move to a colon. A colon. What is a colon? And I wrote it on the board. There are three major reasons that we use a colon for. There are three major reasons a colon. To introduce something. When you want to introduce something by giving examples of it, you start by giving a colon, 2 dots. It's being, by 2 dots. That's a colon. That's number one. Number two is when you have to link, pour lier, 2 independent clauses, 2 phrases indépendantes, auxquelles la deuxième clarifie la première, wherein the second sentence clarifies the first sentence, you use a colon. Okay? If you say something in the first sentence and it's not clear, the second one gives an explanation or clarification on the first, you use a colon. And then the last one is to emphasize a subject in a sentence. Pour mettre l'accent sur un sujet, sur une phrase, dans une phrase, on utilise colon. For example, I give an example for number one. I love, that is giving examples or explanations, ideas. I love, you see, there's a column here. I love, and then you start giving your examples, and you separate the examples with a comma, just like we saw with the comma. I love. So you're talking about introducing something, giving examples or topics or things like that. You use a column. I love, j'aime les mangues, les bananes, les oranges, les fraises, whatever. Et tu sépares la liste avec quoi? Virgule. And then the one is, I dislike one veggie. I dislike one veggie. And you put the column, which is what? Cabbage. That is you emphasizing a subject. And the subject is what? Cabbage. Tu précises sur quelque chose. And that is what? It's cabbage. Cabbage, en français, c'est les choux. So, one thing I dislike, one veggie, s'il y a un légume que j'aime pas, s'il y a quelque chose que j'aime pas, you put your colon and then you start giving the examples that you have. So you're separating les exemples à la phrase. Okay? Then we go now to a semicolon. Remember I told you guys a semicolon is often confused with a comma. D'habitude, il y a une confusion quand est-ce qu'utiliser semicolon et quand est-ce qu'utiliser virgule. Okay? And I told you that virgule, a comma, is when you're just listing stuff. When you're listing ideas, quand tu listes des fournitures, liste pour le marché, just, you're listing stuff. That's different. But with a semicolon, it's almost like you're separating 2 independent clauses. C'est-à-dire une séparation de 2 phrases indépendantes. That's when you use a semicolon, a dot and then colon. That's a semicolon. You have a food, a dot up, and then a comma. So you link, lier 2 dependent clauses, 2 phrases indépendantes, 2 dependent sentences, 2 dependent phrases, but which are closely related, mais qui ont un lien, qui sont semblables. C'est pas le deuxième qui clarifie l'un, mais que c'est semblable. So it could be 2 different examples. C'est-à-dire, ça peut être aussi 2 phrases qui sont des exemples, mais qui sont un peu longues. Alors, pour pouvoir les séparer, you put a semicolon. For example, I have exams next week. I can't go out tonight. Alors, pour remplacer ça des fois, sometimes you can put what they call a linking word, which is so, alors, but there's no linking word. And so, because les 2 phrases sont indépendantes. Parce que, independent, why? Parce qu'on peut toujours dire, I have exams next week, et on met un point là. And you just simply just put this, and you put a full stop. C'est une phrase. Ça peut se tenir toute seule. It's a sentence. It can stand on its own. But because you want to link them together without necessarily putting a full stop, then you put a semicolon. So a semicolon, ça divise une phrase, une longue phrase. Alors si par exemple tu as une très longue phrase, if for example you have a long sentence, okay, and you feel that you're reading it, ça fait 2-3 lignes, c'est tellement long, il n'y a pas de sens, what you do is you split it, tu les divises. You split, you reduce, you cut it by using what? A semicolon. Mais fais attention, be careful. Whatever you are splitting, là où tu vas faire la séparation, you need to make sure that that sentence actually makes sense alone. Tu dois être sûr et certain que cette phrase, là où tu vas faire la séparation, que étant toute seule, la phrase restera aussi intacte, que ça, il y aura de sens dans cette phrase. So that is what they call it independent, you know. I have exams next week. Point. C'est une phrase. J'ai des examens la semaine prochaine. Toute seule, ça reste une phrase propre. You know, I can go out tonight. Je peux pas sortir ce soir. It's a full sentence. It can be on its own. But because you want to put them together, que ça ait de sens, it has to make sense. You know, you say, I have exams next week. I can go out tonight. Okay? I'm too tired. I need to rest. That's another example. Je suis trop fatiguée là. Je veux me reposer. It's a sentence. Because they're linked together. Okay? So that is a semicolon. So please take note quand est-ce qu'utiliser a semicolon and when to use a comma. It's very, very important that you know it and you use it when you're doing your writing. Okay, it's important when you start doing the rédaction, your essays and your poems, whatever it is that you're doing for the writing, but it's very, very important that you take note of, or when you're doing your reading, you need to know when to slow down. Okay, when to know how to slow down. If you're doing your reading and for example, you see a full stop, it means that you have to stop, take a deep breath and continue the next sentence. So that the listener, ceux qui écoutent, sachent que la phrase est terminée et que tu es dans une nouvelle phrase, that you're in a new sentence. It's very, very important. Okay? And then when you see a comma, it means that you're about to give examples. So you slow down a little when you're reading. It's very important. You know, punctuation marks are important for writing as well as in reading practice. Okay? Okay, so the next one would be you use a semicolon within a list that uses commas. C'est-à-dire quoi? Within a list, c'est dans une phrase. Si tu as une liste des exemples, you know, that has a comma. Between those commas, you have to separate each list with a semicolon. For example, last summer, l'été dernier, we traveled, on a voyagé to London. Tu vois, il y a un comma, there's a comma. England, you have a semicolon. Paris, comma, France, there's a semicolon. Dakar, comma, Senegal. C'est comme ça. So you use a semicolon after the comma if you're giving a list. If you're giving a list, you can use a semicolon too. It separates them. It makes it, that's how you write. That's how you write. Take note, especially, you know, when you start your essays, my sixth graders or whichever class that's watching, take note when you're writing. It separates, you know, the list separates when you're using commas. It would separate it. Because London is in England, Paris is in France, Dakar is in Senegal, Douala is in Cameroon, Lagos is in Nigeria, okay? So Yamoussoukro is in Ivory Coast. So you need to do that when you're writing. It's important, okay? And then the next one is a dash. Un tiret en français. Ça s'appelle un tiret. Et en anglais, it's called a dash. A dash, there are two types of dash. There is a N and there is a M. So you have the N dash and the M dash. The N dash is the shorter one. You see, that is just short. It's the shorter one, that is the M dash. The short one, that is just like that. Whereas the M is a long one. The N dash talks about numbers. It's used oftentimes when you're doing range, un range, de tel à tel âge, de telle date à telle date, de tel chiffre à tel chiffre. You use the N dash. So you see, it's a range between numbers and dates. 46 years, de 4 à 6 ans. 1942 to 2000, 1942 à l'an 2000. There's a short M, it's the N with the en dash that we use. Whereas when you go to M, which is the longer dash, it's a dash qui remplace, qui peut remplacer, that can replace parentheses, colons, and commas. Okay? And it's longer. Ça remplace, if you don't want to use parentheses, if you don't want to use a colon, if you don't want to use a comma, you can use an M dash. Okay, and this is an example. Her answer was clear. Tiré, yes. Her answer was clear. M dash, yes. Instead of putting a column, yes. So it just depends. You know, oftentimes you see people use this in a much more informal writing, okay? You will use the M dash, so people don't actually know. But M dash, ça remplace. It would replace a colon, a comma, a parenthesis. So where you don't want to use a colon or a comma, you could use an M dash. Okay, and so these are some of the examples. We'll get back with other ones. Remember, I told you that there were 14. So let's come back. You know, stick with me for the other ones. Thank you.
Tape www.suividecolosénégal.com